Hi, welcome to today's episode. Masoud, why don't we start out with you explaining what you're doing in Oman and
Sure,
in the Middle East? And it's great stuff. So,
sure. Yeah, I might want to take you down memory lane for a second, and tell you the story, and how we arrived at what we're doing right now. So back in 2015, I just graduated University of Toronto, did health informatics and information systems. And this was, after having been in North America for 10 years, both studying and working. And I'd come back to Oman, somewhat reluctantly. I wanted to stay in North America a little longer, but my dad was like, no, you need to come back. And so, we came back and we had all of these great ideas of startups that we wanted to launch, really interesting tech we've seen in the West. Um, basically young, starry-eyed guys. And when I got here, that was not the case. We were just in the midst of the oil price crash. The crude oil market had crashed, and the sentiment turned negative for the first time I had ever experienced it in Oman. So for the first time in my lifetime, um, seeing unemployment in sort of in real time was a really bizarre thing. Here, being a relatively oil-rich country, um, you know, basically there was a certain expectation that provided that you did the right things, aka go to school, graduate from university, there's at least a relatively high-paying government job waiting for you at the end of it, at the very worst. And
mm,
that was no longer the case, right? There were people coming back with arguably smarter and harder working than myself, and weren't able to find jobs, and this was really disconcerting.
mm.
And
And
so
you were
my
right in the mix of that. Then you were
yeah.
expecting a startup or a job when you got there, and it wasn't right.
Yeah, and there wasn't. It's like, wait, this is not right. This is not what's supposed to happen here. Um, and so, I would, have the chats with my partners, now partners, who were just my childhood friends, and we talk about the matters, and there's a lot of doom and gloom, and a lot of negativity, and I think after a while we got sick of our own negativity, and we kind of came to the conclusion that, look, either we're going to do something about this, or we're just gonna just take off and go somewhere else.
And
And
you formed the Beatles.
yeah, yeah. And so we said, you know what? Let's take a stab at this, and let's take a serious stab at trying to solve the problem. And so we kind of took a first principles approach. Took a white paper out, and it's like, okay, so what is the underlying problem here? No assumptions. And what we did was we had informational interviews with pretty much anybody that would talk to us, from government sector, private sector, entrepreneurs, though they were few and far between at the time. And what was really interesting was that on one hand you would find these large funds. We counted well over $1 billion earmarked for investment in startups. And then on the other hand, there's like a dearth of entrepreneurs or people who wanted to enter the entrepreneurship space, but were complaining they couldn't find early stage funding.
Mm.
They had great ideas, and that would definitely solve real problems, but they couldn't find funding. It was like this really weird disconnect that we were seeing in the marketplace.
It happens in Seattle too. So we all share that.
Yeah. Um, well, yeah, I had no idea until I started this investigation, and um, what we decided was like, okay, so how do we bridge the gap between the two, right? I mean, we can't rely on oil and gas because that's obviously, the mega trends are not trending in the right direction. We're going to see a lot more of what we're seeing now, even if we have a dead cat bounce. Even if it goes beyond the dead cat bounce, this thing is trending negatively. So we need to find a more sustainable way of basically founding or building a foundation of our economy, and it can't be on extractive industries. So so with that said, we said, okay, how do we kind of enable the sort of the ecosystem? How do we build like essentially a startup ecosystem from scratch? We don't actually have one. We've never needed one, and that's why we don't have one. And so, through various conversations, we realized that actually what we need to do is we need to look at it quite simply. We were fortunate enough to meet with a guy called Kamran Ilahian. He was kind of a founding board member of SoundHound, and He was a co-founder of Cirrus Logics, and he knows a thing or two about building startups. And what he said to us was, now it seems very simple at the time. Now it seems very simple at the time. It seemed very novel, which is, look, you just need to go look at a healthy ecosystem. Go look at something like San Francisco, London. Go to look, South Korea, and what you'll see is that they have essentially there's just four tranches that a startup goes through throughout its life cycle. It's like idea formation, business formation, growth, and harvest, or like acquisition, IPO, or an exit. I'm like,
What other
okay.
did you physically go to these places and look at startups based off that
Uh,
advice, or did you just look at it remotely? And was it a cultural thing as well, like a startup
mhm.
culture that you had to bring over?
Yes, yes, and yes. So, yes, we did visit San Francisco. We visited London. I unfortunately didn't get a chance to go to South Korea, but my partners did. Um, For sure, and absolutely right. One of the challenges became very clear is the culture piece that comes on top and the policy piece. The culture being arguably harder to change. We are, as a people, tend to be quite risk averse and sort of commingle the idea of failing with being a failure. There's a lot of shame in failing, and therefore people become very, very risk averse and averse to change, which that's obviously the exact opposite of what you need in this space. Um, that said, over time, I think it started to become very clear that the traditional route of guaranteed, let's say, semi-guaranteed government job was no longer a reality, and so people were just kind of jumping into this space out of necessity. And sure enough, the culture was starting to change. There were agents of change, including ourselves, through just getting onto local podcasts, and there was also a realization about a year or less than a year after we started to get into this, even from the government sector, that we need to shift the burden off the public sector onto the private sector, and one way to do this is to kind of enable entrepreneurs. And so with a lot of that communication, we started to see results in the culture shift. Now, one thing we realize is okay. So there's an ecosystem that needs to be built. This is what a good one looks like. Okay, let's take that template and overlay it on ours and see where the gaps are. Um, and there are a lot. And then let's just look at those specific gaps and see where we can kind of lend maximum impact due to prior knowledge, due to our network and resources we can bring to bear. And as a result of that, we decided that we need to basically create a venture capital firm. So we have the first and only private VC firm in the country at the moment, founded in 2018. It's still pretty new. And really, the idea here was to enable these young entrepreneurs who have really great ideas, who just have no access to early capital on terms that make sense, right? Just prior to 2018, prior to us, and a few now there are a few other players, including government entities and angels, but just prior to 2018, 2017, most entrepreneurs would either have to bootstrap, they would either have to go to family offices where the terms were not necessarily founder friendly, or they would have to essentially mortgage their home. And we don't have, let's say, um, right now at the moment, don't we're reforming the bankruptcy laws, but they were not as, let's say, robust as just filing Chapter 11, restructuring a debt, and going at it again. It was a lot more arduous than that.
Oh, I'm
Um,
familiar with that in the Korean
yeah,
context.
yeah, yeah, yeah. To put it mildly. And so we realized that one of the areas that we could really help the situation out is by starting off a venture capital firm. And so what we did was, we founded Phaze Ventures, and the reason why we called it that was, we wanted to change the shape of its economy, but we realized we'd have to do it in phases. Um, and so so we launched the company, and as soon as we started, I remember we had a nice shiny door, a nice sign that said Phase Ventures, and we're expecting a ton of like organic deal flow, and all we heard were crickets. Um,
Hmm. I used to send out 400 cold emails every season of PyCon's Startup Row.
Yeah, it was brutal. Um, and then we kind of realized, okay, this is why there weren't any private VCs support. There isn't much of deal flow. So what we did was we're like, okay, we're not going to just have to like attack or support one part of the ecosystem. We're not going to have to be actively hands-on building this ecosystem from the ground up. And so we decided to have a number of parallel initiatives. This included a accelerator program. We were partnered with our good friends from Spark Labs Global. We created a Spark Labs Energy, and we partnered with our national oil company. We focus on accelerating, startups from around the world that are mostly focused on energy and logistics. And we take a quite a broad term when I say energy and logistics. So when I say energy, I mean anything that could serve the energy industry. So we even have some solutions that, for example, AI solutions that do 100%, let's say, accounts reconciliation or account sampling for audits, for instance. So, but that would be really useful for a huge finance department like a national oil company, for instance. So yeah.
This seems like a good transition to get into the AI efforts you've put on.
Hmm.
I know you've hosted a big event as well,
Hmm.
and you have a lot of thoughts about how you can help the Middle East globally with AI.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, we're a firm believer that that's not only the future, it is the present now. And what we realized here in the region, well, Oman in particular, but the region at large, there have been huge investments made, both in the energy sector, both like from the traditional space and alternative energy, and also the logistics space. We have these huge ports being built, billions of dollars being poured locally and foreign investments. But really, in order to extract value out of that, we see there needs to be that layer of technology on top that not many people are really thinking about. And a big part of that will be, either, AI first solutions, essentially.
I mean, there's other places like Tel Aviv and places like that, kind of, I mean, not real close to you
Mm.
from a logistics perspective, but still, do you have any relationship with any of those other centers
Um,
that seem to have quite a bit of AI going on?
um, and so they're geographically not too far from us, but politically it's challenging to tap into some of these
Politically, it's very
ecosystems.
far.
Yeah,
Okay, I get it.
yeah,
Yeah, I mean
unfortunately.
that's a big topic for a different kind of podcast,
Yeah, yeah.
and um,
Sorry if I
Yeah.
touch on touchy topics, but I'm just
No,
trying
yeah,
to see where do
yeah.
you get, you got your influences for startup in general from very good places, Korea and the
Hmm.
Valley and
Hmm.
Silicon Valley and stuff. And but then
Hmm.
for the AI space, and this is something we keep a very close, obviously, watch on because we have podcasts on it. Where did you get, where do these places get their inspiration for these ideas? Are they just completely novel, or is there an ecosystem you've built there, or where does it come from?
Yeah, it's I think right now it's kind of a function of the ecosystem we're built around here. So one of the things that dawned on me early on is, coming from North America, seeing what is possible and coming here and like, well, we're like 20 years behind at least. There's huge opportunities. I've seen the future. I feel like a time traveler. Um,
mm,
and thinking, why is it that in those more mature markets they're already sold on this? It's just not, you're not selling on whether or not this is the right way forward. It's a question of how do you go forward in this space. But here it's just like initially it was a huge hesitance and what's the right way forward here. And so what I realized is we need to kind of build the ecosystem and bring that experience and demonstrate value, so that people here understand what is possible by using AI, and then sort of get the flywheel spinning and say, okay, what else do you got? What else do you got? And that's kind of what's happening here. So what we did was, on that front, is one of the first projects we have is the Spark Labs Energy Accelerator Program, where what we did was so PDO, which is our national oil company, stands for Petroleum Development Oman. They're arguably one of the largest companies in the country, and one of the biggest, if not the biggest, contributor to our country's revenue. And so we said, look, if we want to move the needle on the country, let's move the needle on this company. And it's a whole other story how we managed to convince them. But we managed to convince them to partner with them and launch this accelerator program, wherein they would give us access to their expertise, so access to their geophysicists and the reservoir engineers, production technologists, and they would also give us, obviously with a good reason beforehand, access to their operational platforms, so access to their actual wells, access to their the data, of course, in a very controlled way. And with that, we managed to attract a lot of startups from around the world, particularly in the energy space. That's one of the key bottlenecks for some of the best companies in the world. Is not necessarily capital, but rather access to IRL platforms in real life. Wells that they can really test their or real in real life data. Very few operators
Well,
from around the world would be willing to take that kind of a risk. So that became our
you
honey trap.
you struck gold in terms of people talk about it's the new oil, right? The
Yes.
data.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely, and we got the data from the oil from the oil field.
Yeah.
Um,
It's it's quite a it, it's a good startup stand-up joke, I think, or data science
yeah,
stand-up joke.
yeah, for sure. I'm taking notes. um,
We should be broadcasting this live, and we should be having some sort of AI running to identify key themes while we're doing it.
Yeah.
In all seriousness, I found that like some of the media companies in the states at least are surprisingly far behind in innovation sometimes, even that are even getting into the space of IRL. I mean, there's some key players who are not behind, but then there's a lot who
mhm.
are. Is this a startup opportunity for them to start bringing this technology to them, or do you expect these larger efforts to be more internally delivered from, and they, how
Mm.
do these startups play with that ecosystem of the larger efforts and media programs that are going on, social media included?
To be honest, that whole space is yet to be discovered, in my opinion. At least when we're talking about media and the application of these sort of AI first solutions in that space here. They
Well, Brian's giving analog
Oh, it is that.
of media
Okay.
companies as traditional companies as to
Yes, yes,
oil companies as traditional
yes.
companies. So yeah,
Oh, sorry, I missed that point. I've been up for like 24 hours
his
at this
fault.
point.
His fault. So it's his fault.
Yeah.
Usually.
No, yeah. So uh, I think I think right now, so this is funny. I was having a chat with somebody from the British Embassy about this just yesterday, and I think generally speaking, the challenge with the large corps, the dinosaurs, as one might call them, and particularly engineering dinosaurs, they're kind of engineered themselves to reduce complexity and reduce uncertainty. And so trying to innovate from within is, within that existing system without having a special track, uh, it just doesn't work. And I've been part of a couple of teams that tried to do this early on when I first started my professional career here, and it died a very quick death
Mm.
initially. And so with that experience, I was able to take that to the senior leadership and say, hey, look, this thing has a lot of traction, a lot of possibilities, but it's not getting any traction just because you're having it inside this ecosystem effectively that is treating innovation like a virus. The
Mm.
organization is killing it like antibodies. What you need to do perhaps is have a outfit sitting outside of your main organization that's able to partner with some of the best startups in the world and let that organization facilitate the interaction, be that adapter between the startup world and this behemoth of an organization, where you can like pinpoint the key stakeholders you need, pinpoint the key resources you need, and have the shelter from senior management to actually prove value. Um, and then once you've proven value, you start to win over the masses, and then you can take it through the traditional, contracts and procurements and scale into the organization. But for now, from what I've seen, trying to build internal, sort of like inside out, in these let's say, more traditional organizations. It is possible, but I would just I wouldn't advise it right now. At least not here in our context.
Yeah, I mean,
Mm.
you're speaking my language a lot because I mean,
Yeah.
my firm does a lot of POCs and pilots and prove it
Mm,
out first, and then
mm.
deliver more and more as we get market share. And it sounds like that's a real pathway to innovation for these startups too, that they could play a role in that proving it out. But are they ever afraid that it just never comes to be? That it lives in a POC land and never,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Some of our portfolio companies at Phase Ventures are feeling the challenges of that. You know, where they just keep asking for free samples, but you start to wonder if they ever have an intent to buy. Um, so what we've done actually with the Accelerator program is we realized this quite early on. And so the way we structured it was we actually start with the need. So actually, our accelerator program is bolted on pretty tightly to the big company PDO in this case, where we have weekly joint teams. We call them joint task forces between our team of analysts and sometimes partners, along with their counterparts that also include senior members from the finance directorate, from the legal department, from the new technologies department, from the operations department, and of course the new business development department. We start by trying to understand what are the strategic imperatives that you have. What are the things that are keeping up your leaders at night? Oh, it's industrial wastewater. Yeah, because you're producing hundreds of thousands of cubic meters of wastewater as a byproduct of extracting oil out of the ground, and you have nowhere to put it. And it costs a lot of energy
Mm.
to put it back in the ground, and it's detrimental to the environment. We need to solve this problem, and if we can solve it, we're going to unlock hundreds of millions of dollars. So we're looking for these kind of problems. So we go through this exercise with the organization, and they kind of tell us like these are our real big problems. You can solve this. This is $100 million problem, and we say, okay, now that's interesting. So we kind of do a little bit of research around that. We kind of refine that long list into maybe something more manageable, maybe 5 or 6 key strategic themes, and then we go out hunting, which we're kind of doing now over 6 months, where we just like literally we review like over 1,000 startups, and then we kind of refine them based on a system that we have. Obviously, we'll look for the commercial viability, the maturity, and et cetera, the relevance. And then we kind of whittle it down to about something more manageable, to around like a top 30 list, where we'll then share it with the corporate. Um, and then the ones that they are very interested in, we'll take it through the channels to go for a much deeper due diligence, like a deeper dive with their technical teams. And if that, passes the smell test, then actually what we do is we say, look, you really think that this is a real problem? Yes. Do you really think that this team can solve that problem? Yes. Okay. Now, at scale? Yes. Okay. Well, what are the KPIs that they need to hit to prove to you that they can take this proof of concept and turn it into a proof of value, such that if they do hit these KPIs, there's a contract waiting for them at the back end of this, and they sign it. And so that's
Mm.
how you know, like, this is not just a free sample that's going
So,
nowhere.
sounds like a very effective process where you really set up the success metrics, and that's probably why you're so successful at this. Well, we're getting a couple 2 minutes left, so it's getting close to time. Is there any like leave behind or a way to contact you or anything you would like to leave listeners with regarding, any last messages for them?
Um, yeah, that's a good question.
I,
I mean,
I
for
mean,
one,
are you calling out to entrepreneurs to look at what you're doing and contact you and contribute to your efforts, for example?
yeah, for sure. Anybody in this space, as I said, we talk about energy and logistics. We're looking at very broadly. If you have an interesting company that can service both those industries, do get in touch with us. Do check out Spark Labs Energy, our accelerator. Check out Phaze Ventures, our VC firm. And of course, you can always reach out to me directly via LinkedIn or Masoud R on Twitter. I'll be more than happy to respond. And then, of course, I would always say, to my friends in North America, I think the U.S. market is obviously a gigantic market, but I would definitely suggest coming here in the GCC, and specifically not just the MENA region, It's growing rapidly. It's still blue ocean. There's lots of capital that's looking for places to go and very clear problems that have already been solved before elsewhere that are looking to be solved here. Now's the time.